Well, we may want to take a deep dive into some of the things, some of the issues that have already been placed in our laps. As you know, the judges were placed into the safety and
Public Safety
public
Committee.
safety committee.
Yes, sir.
That's off the table. We have nothing else other than the issues that were there prior to anything else. Is that right? That's.
That's correct.
Let me tell you something, Mr. McDowell, I really think we can wrap this up today.
Y'all want to do that today?
Yeah, this is not a problem, we can run,
And
I
some of these
promise.
things we already made decisions on, so.
All right, if we can do that today, it's
We'll be
easier
done.
for us, for me, and we'll be ready to give a report to the next council meeting.
That would be excellent.
If we can do that,
Yes, sir.
we can do that, say, within the hour.
I hope so.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Yeah, we can do it.
All right, 30 minutes.
So,
Ma'am, if
so,
you would.
yes, sir. So these were some outstanding items to clean up some of the boards and commission information and just have some resolution on some issues around boards and commissions. So we have a list of action items from prior meetings with this group and some input from some council members related to the boards and commissions. So what we've provided is just a listing of each item that I think if we could just go item by item and decide on some resolution. There is, when we get to one of them, there is some input from staff. And when I get to that, I'll let you all know what that input is. Actually, let me forward you an email from Krista Hampton on that one. So we'll go ahead and get started. We actually have a copy. Ms. Ashley's provided us with a copy of the current board and commission handbook, which we have saved the revisions of that document until you all had a chance to review it. Some of it is dated. It does have some reference to the prior council members. But I know that there was some interest in having some standardized information and guidelines in these, in the handbook. So I know we wanted to add how we would be appointing and reappointing to that as far as the odd and even days, months for appointments. So that's in that bullet.
Make sure you understand what they're doing now is advertising for the open positions on the odd month or even month?
The odd month,
Odd month and
appointing on the
appointments
even month. Yes, sir.
So we will be voting on appointments 6 months.
6 months, that's right.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Good deal.
And so we will add that reference to the guidelines, to the handbook, so that's there. Also, you all had some concerns about the way we carry forward any applications. We could add that also to the guidelines, because if they're not appointed, the applicant will need to reapply when another vacancy occurs. So that can be added as well. And then I think there was some desire to either beef up or add some information about attendance, because there's some concern about people not showing up, no
What had happened
shows.
to us, Ms. Pam, is that on a lot of the guidelines, the chairman of the committee could remove people for absentee, for not attending, but nobody else could.
Right.
And so we either need to make it where council or the city manager, like you have written, if you,
So there is a reference to attendance requirements on page 7 of the handbook that we provided you. So we can update that information to say exactly what you're saying, Mr. Taylor.
what I would do is I would just, absence from 3 consecutive meetings. That's correct.
That's the current.
That's the current.
Now, we could change that to 2 if that's what you, or add the reference to 2 no-shows
Let's change
in
that to
addition.
2. Let's change that to,
You change that to 2, is that no-show or 2?
Two consecutive, no-shows.
Now, is that without excuse or?
Yeah, so we were thinking that that would be a no-show. For example, if someone had a medical situation and they you know, they were out for a period of time. We wouldn't want to penalize them for that. But if a person just has no regard for attending and just doesn't show up and doesn't have any valid reason, then that would be grounds for.
Is it clear then that the chair does that, or is that just normal processes as that person? Is that on the application, or would that be on the application?
I don't think, Ashley, do we have that on the application? We don't have that now. No, attendance, yeah.
See, I would suggest that we take away the ability of the committee chairman to terminate somebody and let the city manager, you know, in other words, the chairman recommends the council or the city manager for the termination.
Okay.
When they get accepted, do they sign like a commitment or anything? Because that might be a good opportunity to say, you know, like, when accepting this position, I, you know, pledge to or whatever.
Put it on the application.
Put in the, okay. Process.
Just put it on the application.
I think that's.
Yeah, when you submit it, and maybe adding in a clause that says, if appointed, I will agree to the attendance requirements or something like that.
And the requirements are, if you miss two on it,
Yep.
I mean, it brings accountability in, and that needs to be a part of the application.
Failure to attend 50% of the meetings or missing 2 consecutive.
That's right.
That's what's in here.
That's what's in there now? All right, 'cause I hadn't seen this.
But I just was looking at it, see.
It's on page 7.
And there's 3 over here, and we're changing that to 2, but.
Now, in
That's what
addition,
we wanna do, Ashley, though, is move away from each committee having its own attendance requirements to where we've got there's general requirements, period. You know,
I think in addition to that, the process needs to be that they receive this, and we verify that they receive this, and have them sign receipt of this as well.
That
In
would be
addition.
good, because it goes over everything.
I mean, no offense, dear, but we don't even sign anything when we take office. I mean.
We get sworn in by a judge, though.
Well, I don't think we need to sign.
I mean, I'm just,
I don't think that.
I don't wanna get in an argument with it, you know, just, you put it on the application that, you know,
50% of your meetings.
or just put it on the application
Yeah.
that, you know, all rules and requirements are included in the boards and commissions handbook. I mean, and post this online, and that's it. I mean, no offense. If I gotta tell you, you gotta come to half the meetings, I shouldn't have put you in there to begin with. You know? And you
I think
start
that's
taking,
the best way to do that. though.
and you start taking some people off of these boards for not coming, and everybody get the message pretty quick.
Oh, absolutely.
What?
Nothing.
I mean,
I don't think it's also crazy to have somebody sign a handbook. You know, staff here probably have to sign a staff
it's just
handbook.
another task for us to do.
Sure,
You know what I'm
Sure.
saying?
but
To ma-
as
to
long
make
as
sure
there's a way
somebody
for
knows
us
that they ought to come to a
to
meeting. Again, I'll go back and.
standardly look at attendance across the board and be able to say, hey, these folks haven't shown up, whether it's the chair submitting their attendance logs or whatever, we just need to be able to send the message that this is a commitment and we expect you to do work.
It seems to me that once we give this out, once we post this online, once the applications are quote-unquote updated, the worst thing you can do is appoint somebody there. They don't attend. Accountability, we've lost accountability issues.
Sure.
So let's put some teeth in this.
Well, and personally, I think having them, when the secretary gives them their documents that they need to have, and they sign for it, that's accountability. I mean, the secretary is gonna be the one that has to provide us with attendance records, because we don't attend all these boards and commissions. We're relying on the secretary or the liaison or the person that's, you know, the chair of these committees to provide us with this information. So, you know, I don't think it's that complicated to ask somebody to sign something saying they're in receipt of something. I can't tell you how many times during HR, people say, I never saw that. And we'll say, well, it's posted online, and they'll say, well, I never saw that. So I think it's a necessary thing just to get a piece of paper and start getting attendance records from the secretaries. Because we're not gonna be able to say whether they were there or not if we don't have the attendance records.
You make me sound like the bad guy 2 days in a row, but I'm gonna tell you something. If you don't come to 2 meetings, I don't care if you didn't see the document or not. You're out. I mean, and I'm just trying not to get.
Well, and I think there's other information in this document that really is pertinent to their being on a board or commission. So I don't think it's just attendance. There's some other things that are pertinent, and so we can add attendance to that, to this, beef that up. Because there's some ethics, a conflict of interest statement in here. There's some other things that are important.
I would post it on Matchboard, period. If you
Sure.
want- If y'all wanna put the extra, make people sign it, have at it, but post it.
Can you post it on Matchboard and do an e-sign, Ashley? Okay. Yeah, as long as it's something you can do automatically
If you
online.
want to, make it, what you should do is post it on Matchline, put a check
Put the
box
check.
down at the bottom that you got a check that says,
That's
I
reasonable.
read and reviewed the Boards and Commissions handbook.
That's
Yeah.
reasonable.
You submit the application.
Yeah, I like that.
That's reasonable.
That's good. That's a good way to handle that.
So, going back to the removing folks, so staff would keep us updated from the secretary logs of folks. Or are you just gonna automatically clean them off, and make it vacant once they miss 2 in a row? Or do we need to do anything?
I guess I
don't
was
think it's gonna be
thinking
our call.
the easier way to do it is that we just
Take them off?
take them off.
Yeah,
And then we
I mean,
give
if
you,
they violated, then yeah.
and Ashley and Joe have done some of that with one committee. They've sent them notice that you are gonna be removed for, excessive absences.
Cool, works for me.
And so they get something in writing notifying them, and then we go ahead and take them off. And then we could give you all, a list or a report or so, provide some information to let you know that person. Because you would want to know if somebody you appointed gets removed because they
Right,
didn't
right.
show up. So we can have a process of notification to you all.
Well, the process will already been, you would have already set the process. Our job then is to just make sure that we've been notified that there's a person who's going to come off.
Yes,
That's-
yes,
yeah.
sir.
Don't you think that would be the right approach to do that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Attendance.
Okay, so I think we've gotten, pretty much handled that first bullet.
I think, yeah, we got through all of those.
Yeah, we've handled all those.
So the combining Board of Adjustments, that's the,
On the second one, I think you're gonna need to go to legal. I don't know if we can combine them, but what you do is one person can serve as a member of each one of those boards. You know what, you follow, I think legally,
It's gonna be hard to combine.
that's what, I think legally, because of the different functions, you can't have one deal. So what we would do is, if you're appointed to, what we would call those,
if you're appointed to one, you're appointed to all. So it's the same people on all three.
that's right, so, because most of these committees have never met.
That's true. Some of them have never met.
The
Gotta
Bull
have
Street
it.
ones
But you
never
have to
met.
have them.
But you have to have them, if somebody wants to make the appeal, so, I mean, we could call these, they're all, it would just be, if you're appointed, we would do one, you're appointed, just like Dr. Bustle said, to each one. And that way, if there ever is a meeting, or multiples, they can have them meet one, adjourn, start the next one, adjourn, start the next one, adjourn. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to have them on separate days.
So I will ask legal if there's any issue with having a consistent members on all the boards. And then, Krista did say that You could eliminate BOSA form-based codes altogether. Let's see. And I'll ask legal about that.
Right.
Okay?
I think what the question really is, legal, it's not can somebody serve on all three, but if you're on one, does it prohibit you from serving?
Serving
Serving on another.
Yes. If you're on one, does that prohibit?
Changing the name of the Tree and Appearance, the Appearance Commission, I think that's a good one.
Let's go with it.
That would be just what we would recommend for council, I guess.
Right, that would be a council recommendation that you guys wanted to do that.
Is there a formal vote that has to be made on that?
I don't think that, yeah, they're in the ordinance, so we may have to change the ordinance. So we'll check to see if it's an ordinance change, and then you all can make that as a recommendation when you report out to council.
And the next one, that's a policy, not a deal. And there, we have some boards that I think you gotta live in the city. And then there's other boards that I think it's okay if you just work in the city.
Well, I think we're gonna need some conversation, because in the past, what we've done, when folks submitted applications, and they lived outside of the city, they worked in the city and submitted that address. To just city and not outside of the
Yes,
city.
sir, but on the community relations group that we just had, we had quite a few that neither lived nor worked in the city.
Yeah, and they had like the Richland County districts listed on the map board instead of City of Columbia.
And here's where I'm coming from, and, I think if it's a zoning type issue, or, planning commission, BOZA, DDRC, you gotta live in the city. If it's H-tax, and you run a hotel or a restaurant in the city, but live in the county, I mean, I'm fine with that. But I don't, I guess what I'm saying is things that, we can have an unwritten policy, I don't care, but I mean, things that involve the everyday quality of life, you need to live here.
So, what about if we required for our land use committees that you have to live in the city? And that would be Board of Zoning Appeals, DDRC, Planning Commission.
That's what you're saying.
Because we already have them split up into buckets of, like, you have advisory committees, community impact, funding, intergovernmental, and land use.
With affordable, I mean, again, I really don't, I'd hate to go through all these committees just to look and see.
I'm sort of the opinion that BOZA, DDRC, planning, those things remain. I think that there probably needs some additional conversation whether or not.
Well, I mean, like the Appearance Commission, y'all have to live in the city.
Yeah, that's right. That's
I
right.
mean, in all honesty, I don't have a big problem making it say you gotta live in the city to be served on a city commission. That doesn't bother me a bit.
Well, actually, Pam, if we did that, that's what we've been doing, right? Or trying to adhere to. Folk living in the city and serving on a board or commission.
Well, for some of them, we've allowed people who just work in the city but don't live in the city. Yeah.
Hotels.
You got some more.
I
that's
think
right.
land use
Part of the problem is
definitely,
you get into some of these committees where you've got state mandated spots, like hotel deals. And I mean, to find hotel people to serve on the H-tax committee, to live in the city is just, is virtually impossible.
and then the intergovernmental boards and commissions, the preference has been that those people live in the city.
That's right.
Because a lot of times, when they're intergovernmental, people are appointing from other localities like Lexington and supporting people from Lexington. And so those two sections, and again, this is a little dated because there's some things on here that have sunsetted and aren't here anymore.
Really,
But,
the funding ones, the H-tax and the A-tax are the only two really that,
Could
Could we
live
say
and
something
work.
like priority is given to those who live and work in the city in our selection
that
process?
says that if you don't live in the city, you can apply.
That's right. That's right.
True. I'm trying to find a happy medium here.
I have no problem
But
making you say, sticking with what council said in the past, saying you gotta live in the city.
that's what we've done.
We just don't advertise that there are exceptions to the rule.
And I think, one of the issues, Ashley, that we ran into in the past, of course, again, we had folk applying for boards and commissions. They worked outside of the city, but they worked inside of the city and used that address.
You mean they lived outside of the city?
They lived outside of the city.
And they use their work
and
address.
They used the work address.
Yeah, that happened. And also, some of the boards and commissions have very unique positions that they're recruiting for. And we had very limited people who had the qualifications for some of those, like your architectural
Yeah, but guess what?
engineer or
I'm
something.
not gonna take a guy that lives in Lexington and put him on the DDRC as an architectural historian. I mean,
But those people worked in Columbia, not lived in Columbia. Well, I'm
they
just
don't have
giving
to
you
live-
some
I know.
reference.
They
Mhm.
don't have to live with it, though, that's what I'm.
That's true.
Well, I
That's
think we
true.
need to just cut to the chase. I just think if you live in the city and you apply for a board or a commission, you're qualified to do that. Other
So are
than
you
that-
saying that it will only be people who live in the city?
That's what you said our policy is now.
Yeah.
Well, we've done live or work. We've done both.
Yeah, the last council made it live,
You live in the city.
We've done both. We've done lived or worked in the
and
city.
I think that's probably, again, H-tax and A-tax are the oddball. Interesting story, just so you know, Richland County, I had somebody who lives in Wood Creek come visit me the other day. They wanted to be on, they all applied for a board and commission. They had also applied to Richland County to be on the planning commission. Person is in the real estate business. The county told her point blank, this is interesting, unless you live in the county,
That's right.
you can't be on the planning commission. And I'm looking at this lady going, Wood Creek is in Richland County. They said, if you live in the city, we disqualify you from being on the Richland County Planning Commission. Now, interestingly enough, technically, that's what I told her. I said, technically, I can understand that they don't want somebody who doesn't live within the jurisdiction that this committee has planning control over voting on things. But as a taxpayer in Richland County, you got a hell of a legal case.
Right, because yeah.
But my point here simply is, the other areas around here are not letting, if you don't live in their intergovernmental area, they're not gonna let you. I mean,
So, I mean, I think that should be a recommendation that you all make to the rest of council,
You live in the city.
that if you,
but if that's our current policy, which is what you said,
when did I say that?
you said.
I meant to say you
About
could
5
live
minutes
and
ago,
work.
You said that, I quote, the previous council changed it to where you had to live in the city.
I think that was
No,
Ashley.
that was Ashley. I didn't say that. Yeah, no,
said
I didn't say that.
Well, let's not get into the blank.
They went back and forth about live or work or reside, and sometimes it was a case-by-case basis, but what they did institute, because they couldn't decide in some ways, listing the home address and the work address for every applicant. That's where that came from. So when they reviewed it, they could decide based on that after seeing it. So that's where that comes from. And then some people that they recommended or preferred sometimes only lived or did not work or vice versa. So that's why they were kind of flexing that.
Let me tell you, you wanna make it simple, you have to be eligible to vote in the city election in order to serve on a committee.
I mean, let's be real honest about it. If you live in the city Bottom line.
I suspect if you wanted to get down to it, that'd be the legal answer too.
But that's, you're exactly right.
Well, it's really up to you all,
Well, that's-
what you would like to do. If you want it to be that they live in the city, and that's the requirement, then that's fine with me.
Because I know of several instances where folk lived outside of the city, worked inside, applied with a city address, were elected, and then they bowed out.
Sure, I'm sure that happened. You know, what I encourage you to do is give yourself some flexibility, because you will have someone that's, you know, a candidate that you may be interested in, that you think is, or someone on council is interested in, and they work in the city, but they don't live in the city. So,
All right.
but it's up to you all, whatever your preference is. I don't have,
I think consensually, we've decided that it's,
We've concretized.
let me use
so
my words.
concretized on living in the city.
There was another good word yesterday, I'm trying to remember what it was.
Oh, the best quote ever.
Conversated, or wasn't it?
No, the
No,
best quote ever
conversated.
he had yesterday for Diabetes Month is, and I quote, "There are unintended consequences to the goodies in life."
That's right.
The goodies
I
in
am
life.
making that into a T-shirt.
So the goodies in life.
Like Reverend Dix, when
Hey,
he
look.
said, the birds chirping in the trees.
Yeah.
Look, you talking about consequences, hey, here it is right here.
I'm with you, brother.
That's it, that's consequences, right? Pam, are we clear?
Yes,
You think
clear.
consensual?
Sure, we're
When we
clear.
have
Okay, we can discuss it if you want to in a city work session. I do think probably the fairest and best thing for us to do is just simply say, you gotta be a city resident.
Absolutely,
Works for me.
absolutely.
I mean, I would tell you, the University of South Carolina pretty much says you have to be a University of South Carolina, well, perfect example, you gotta be a state resident to serve on the university board, because it's a state board.
So are you all comfortable with adding that back into the press release?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I put it on Matchboard too. Let me give you another checkbox if you want at the bottom. I checkbox that I'm a resident of the city, and, you know, I live within the city limits of the city of Columbia. Could be a second checkbox down the bottom.
Sure.
Right?
So the next group was the sunsetting of some committees. And those committees are listed and when they last met or their next scheduled meeting. So we were going to talk about either sunsetting them, you know, at the next, do we have to, I guess we'd have to say them at the next meeting, which ones were sunsetted. And then have it on record, and then have the plan for, if it's not the next meeting or, you know, hasn't already occurred, then state the date of the sunset.
Some of these already have automatic sunsets. I thought I heard Ms. Herbert say that the last meeting was the last meeting of the, their Affordable Housing Task Force, and she wanted to spin it off into something else.
She had turned it into
And
subcommittees.
yours did sunset on homelessness,
Yeah.
It was started as an ad hoc
That's
task
right.
force.
but didn't it have a sunset deal on it?
Yeah, on September 21st was our
6
last.
months, wasn't it?
It was 6 months, yep. And then the advisory committee, we had talked about, since we're going to give that equity study to community relations, that they would kind of,
Yeah, the tax modernization committee's done. So there, you know, I don't know if we have to sunset some of these, like I say, equity, you say is done? Or we moved it to.
we moved it,
Community relations.
Right, Community
So
Relations
that's-
Council.
That committee's gone.
That's gone,
Affordable housing, I'm pretty sure I thought I heard her say that.
no, I think that she just said that instead of one big committee, they've now moved into like a development subcommittee, an advocacy subcommittee. And so they are still meeting.
Okay, then that's not a sunset.
So
It's just, we need to vote on how, you know,
I would keep that one until we know, because they're like launching a campaign and, yeah.
short-term rentals, we need to give them a sunset date. Howard, you know what's going on. I mean, and I think this thing is being extended out in an effort to try to recruit additional votes that may or may not be there. And I mean, and it's causing upheaval, and they should be able to reach a decision by, pick the date, March 30th?
So if we did that and we sunsetted at March 30th.
Yeah.
That simply means that we got something on the table.
They gotta bring it or end it March 30th. Why are you
Okay.
shaking your head?
More time than I would have given, but.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm open for discussion.
Well, I think March 30th is an appropriate time.
Or you wanna say
I mean,
March
it's-
1st?
I say March 30th.
For January.
I mean, I don't care either, but I think we need to.
I know,
at
I was
least
just
say-
ending it on a quarter, is what I was doing.
That's fine. I think, so letting them know that they need to have something for us by the April meeting about, like a report out from that.
Sunset it out March 30th.
That's right.
This may also solve itself, considering some stuff that's happening at Richland County.
Well, the state, I think, is gonna solve it for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Which means, they're gonna take the jurisdiction away from local governments.
So tax
The county, you
modernization
understand,
is done.
The county doesn't apply to what happens in the city. The county were to, let's just say, for example, the county were to say,
Only in commercial, not in residential.
yeah, that only
districts.
applies in unincorporated Richland County. They can't, they got no, no forest acres, no anybody else.
Okay. So really the ones we're gonna continue is short-term rentals and affordable housing task force.
Right.
Yeah, the others are,
Have
let's just
sunsetted.
make sure, Pam, just for the record,
Mm-hmm.
those things that are sunsetted are the advisory committee, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Tina's committee, the Affordable Housing Committee, we broke that up.
It's staying though,
It's-
yeah.
It's staying where it's at.
Well, let me
isn't it?
ask you this, should it be reconstituted or just left as it is?
I think it should be left as it is. They're just meeting in smaller groups. Yeah.
You got what, Erica?
They have two subcommittees.
Okay, that's sunsetted, is that right?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
So the next bullet was Administrative Policy Committee to vote on the method to appoint council members to boards and commissions, rotate every 2 years or based on term limits.
I suggested that, because here's the deal. I think it would be, we've got people landing on committees and staying on these committees forever, and other council members are not being exposed to it. And I think if we, for example, and we're talking about things like Bull Street Commission, comment, and things, that if we, where we have just 2 appointments or whatever to these things, if we rotate our council members across every 2-year terms,
Or at least offered it.
Huh?
Or at least offered it.
well, I think we ought to just, we ought to appoint, see, today we just appoint you to the comment board.
With no certain time.
That's
frame.
right, and you get, we ought to do 2-year terms. I think it would be, and I know it takes time, but I think it would be most helpful if every member of the Columbia City Council had to rotate through the comment system for 2 years at a time and understanding that bus system. I would also say that sometimes what happens to, it's human nature, Reverend McDowell, you know this probably better than me, that we serve on these boards to be advocates for the citizens of Columbia, not necessarily advocates for these boards. And lots of times you can stay on too long and you lose that objectivity you need to have. You know, again, do I want to be on the comment board for 4 years? Absolutely not. But would I like a 2-year term where I understand the impact and the finances of the bus systems and can bring a fresh look from the city's perspective on an ongoing basis, like with bus stops downtown and things like that? You know, I think that will be helpful. So I'd like to see us make that recommendation to council that all the current, and the second piece of that would be current members. We just need to think on our current members when they would, you know, if they've served for more than 2 years, you know, or do we take everybody that's sitting in this position and say, okay, you're, as of January 1st or whenever you were appointed, your two-year term begins, and then you roll off 2 years from now, for example.
Okay.
See, in other words, you got four, interestingly enough, we have four new council members and three, and some of the three have been on boards for 3 and 4 years. I mean, the same thing with the COG. I mean, everybody ought to have to be on the COG board for at least 2 years, so you understand what the darn thing is. I mean, it's a
Lexington
misery.
County.
But I mean, it's something you gotta,
Nope.
it's me and Will and Howard. Will's the vice chairman of the COG now.
He is.
That
So,
sounds good to
So,
me.
yeah, it does.
It's like the round robin.
And I think what I hear you saying, Taylor, is that 2 years, every person who sits around the table has an opportunity to be in conversation with a board like Comet.
That's right.
And it gives an overwhelming view of what's taking place in that bus system.
Exactly. And what
Every member.
and here's the exception. If you're in a leadership position, you can serve a second consecutive one. In other words, like, for example, Mr. Brennan is the vice chairman of the COG this year. If he has the opportunity to be the chairman next year, I would not want to take that away from the citizens of Columbia.
okay.
Does
So.
that make sense?
It does. So getting back, Councilman Taylor, about how you start, do you want us to get you a list of people who are currently on? Because I'm following you to say, do you start it and then they serve 2 years and then you switch them? Or do you go ahead and figure out who's been on for 2 years
see,
already?
Well,
Can I answer, let me just, here's the issue. Because of the way our elections run every 2 years, see, if we go to January and we could appoint people who may leave by not running for reelection or not winning
Right.
in November. So the question would be, if people have served, in other words, does this January become, if you've been on it for a year, everybody stays on their position they're in now until January of 24.
Okay.
Okay, when the new council convenes in 24, terms rotate at every election time. So we're never
Okay.
losing people in the middle of a 2-year term.
Okay, that makes sense.
And y'all, I mean, if you think this is something that's good, we probably have a couple folks that might not like it, so we probably need to be
Well,
willing.
it gives an opportunity for leadership to sort of spread its wings over into other areas. And of course, I've never served on the comic board, never. It would give a person an opportunity to serve and to get a full picture of what that bus system is all about. I mean, just comment, but it could be certainly applicable to anything else.
That's right. Well, I mean, it's all up. Comment, again, Bull Street Commission, Lake Murray Country,
Isn't transitions one?
transitions. I mean, think about it. I
Housing?
mean, that's.
Who's that now?
Housing
that's-
Authority.
No, it wouldn't be housing authority.
Midlands Housing Alliance.
Housing
I was like,
Alliance.
there's a housing there, Midlands Housing Alliance.
Anyway, I think if y'all everybody's agreeable, I just think that would be very healthy for us.
Okay, definitely. I think that's a good idea.
Again, make the note that if a
2024.
council member is in
Leadership
a
role.
position or in line for a leadership position, term can be extended 2 years.
Got that.
See, Howard right now, I think is chairman of the Bull Street Commission. Will is a vice chairman of COG. So, we wouldn't take Howard out in the middle of his chairmanship. And if Will's in line to be the next chairman of the COG, which would be very good for the city of Columbia, we wouldn't want to take him out either.
Makes sense. Good.
All right?
Your next bullet was consider if appointees can serve on two competing committees or be appointed to the same committee for another jurisdiction while serving on a city board or commission.
No.
No.
I have a problem with
No, I
that,
do too.
and that's why I've asked for an update about rotating off the chair for the H-Tax, because she can't serve as both Richland County and City of Columbia H-Tax chair.
So is it consent, I mean, I can buy into that.
What is a competing committee?
We were referring to this individual who's
Okay,
on
well,
Lexington
That's
and,
the second one. So delete that competing committees, just say, cannot serve, or cannot be appointed to the same committee for another jurisdiction while serving on the same city board or commission.
Yeah, but there could be something that's named slightly different, but serves the same purpose.
But I mean,
It's just a word, but my thing is,
see, the only reason I bring it up is the two competing committees implies it's internal to
It's
the city.
internal, that's right,
got it.
that's right.
so,
So
I'm trying to
you-
think
so
of the
the answer to
example
that
that
is
you were thinking
You can only serve
about.
on one
One committee.
city committee at a
Committee.
time.
That's right.
If you wanna make that a separate bullet,
Serve on one committee
City
at a time.
committee at a time.
Okay.
Because
with the
ultimately,
exception of our appeals.
right,
Gotcha.
you got it, Pam?
Yes, sir. So serve on only one committee at a time, and you cannot serve on, the same committee for another jurisdiction as ours, okay.
Let me ask you this, do we wanna even say you just can't serve on a committee for another jurisdiction? That's kinda like dual office holding a little bit, can you be on the H committee for the city of Columbia and the planning commission for Richland County?
I think you could. I don't know that they're,
I wonder if there's examples of that.
That's,
That's right,
Mm-hmm.
all of them almost.
right.
That's what kind of power?
let's not complicate this thing no further.
Only serve on one city committee.
One
or-
city, that's correct.
And can't be appointed to the same.
Okay.
Dualistic roles, I think, is gonna run us and put us in a darn log jam, man.
And Ashley, maybe it's you, maybe it's Tina Saxon, but just, can you keep us updated about the H-Tax committee? Because we do need a new chair before they meet again.
I believe that they've met again recently, which is why we were trying to,
Yeah, they met, they met because that was, Missy's presentation last night. I know that came out of their most recent meeting.
So what,
The
yeah,
H-Tax met, they met,
Those recommendations came out of H-Tax?
Those recommendations came.
no, I know that they met recently. I was just, because she was
You got-
talking about all that stuff.
Where you're at is that they held back $400,000 from the original allocation, and they've got a meeting, I thought in January.
I'll send an email.
I thought it was January, I could be wrong, maybe sooner, to reallocate that 400,000.
I know they have a meeting to do that, but I think they had a meeting most recently. But we can verify that, because they do have a meeting to do that. You're right, Mr. Taylor. That's coming up. Okay, so we'll check on that. Administrative Policy Committee to discuss term limits for the Citizens Advisory Council to Columbia Police Department.
I think we've talked about, not this particular bullet point, but we've talked about term limits. What's the current, is there a term limit already set?
So I don't think the Citizens Advisory has term limits. Let me,
There are some, no, I think we're hearing globally, is there a term limit?
Yeah.
And I know there are some
Is
term
it-
limits on some committees, because I know there were people that termed out of being on the planning commission.
yes, there are some for specific ones, but there's not a global
Put
term
words
limit.
in Reverend McDowell's mouth, but I think that question would be, should we take what our term limit policy is for some and make it for all?
Oh,
My only concern with that would be if there's some statutory reason why they have a particular term limit. I mean, we can look and check on that.
So my
That's
other
just
question
my only
Is
concern.
it not somewhere in is it, I'm sorry, Joe. Is it not somewhere in policy where there is a term limit?
So in the guidelines or in the documentation for a lot of these, they have term limits that are stated. And they're different though. I mean, some, are shorter than others, but they vary. They're kind of a little bit
Can we
all
ask,
over the place, isn't that right, Ashley? I mean, it just depends on the committee. But I think that there was some reason why those boards or commissions chose their terms. Whether it be for consistency, continuity, I think that was there's some reason for it. I don't know if, I don't know if we would want to
is
do
there
it
any
the same for everybody.
we know that perhaps there are term limits set. What are they?
They're different. They're different for every board and commission. I mean, some of them I don't think, there are some that don't have term limits at all. Right. They don't have term limits at all. And then there are ones that have specific term limits. So I guess the question is, would you want to set term limits for those that don't have term limits at all?
I think we
And
should
then
just have
leave
a
the other
standard.
ones
Yes.
I think we should have a standard 4-year term for those that don't have term
Yes.
limits.
Okay.
If there is not a term limit set, folk is just sort of served
Forever.
forever. So why not set this thing at either 2 or 4 years, man?
Okay.
At the 2-year rate, it gives everybody an opportunity to either rotate in or rotate off and get a taste of that. But I think it would be to our advantage to look at a 4-year term.
Yeah, I think 4 years fine, but I also think we have some issues with people that have been sitting on, particularly age tax, for way longer than that.
How long a term are you talking about?
4 years if there's not a term limit listed currently.
That's too short.
No, I don't think so. For Citizens Advisory Council,
Why
for
do you
example.
think it would be too short?
2 terms. I mean, you're
So
a
could
You
it-
can serve up to 2 consecutive terms of 4 years, so 8 years, but
That's
4
what I'm
years.
talking about.
You think that's too short, 8 years?
No, you said 4 years.
She's talking about
One term
one
is
term
4
is
years.
4 years.
One term, 4 years, 2 terms.
And that two
one
consecutive
term.
terms.
So
What about non-consecutive terms? What
I think
about
it's just, you
2
can-
terms,
you can serve 2
period?
terms.
Okay.
So for some of these where there's these like random ex officio members and stuff, how do we, that's like not, what do we
Say
do?
again, how did it?
There's like random committees that people have appointed these fake ex officio members and they aren't in statute or anything.
I got a level, I agree with you.
I have a
don't
problem
know
with
Who
it.
in the world, which is the one that's, is it? the-
Age tax.
Yeah, okay, but no, there's one that's even worse than that. Is it the tree and appearance, or no, it's the climate one where they got 11 non-voting members.
Yeah. That's actually the next
That's the
bullet
next
point, but-
bullet.
For example, we have somebody who gets direct funding from H-Tax serving as ex officio for the last 25 years. If we need institutional knowledge, it's called a phone or email, and you can pick up the phone, or you can email them for information. So what's the process to change that?
I don't know that there is a process. I mean, I think that, It's just something we've done, and I guess you could, right, you could stop doing it.
Who is we though?
Who's we?
Is it the mayor?
Council, the prior councils.
Have said you can put these non-voting members on?
Yeah.
Pam, is there,
It's like a soft roll-off.
it's a what now?
But for 25 years?
I know, but that's essentially, so they're there in an advisory capacity,
Right.
Not when you're a line item.
according to the.
Prior council.
Okay, well, I already just sent an email to all of us about the H-Tax. We need a new chair, so, I mean, what do? Can we bring this up at work session and get consent from everyone to?
Here's the issue. I think, and I totally agree with with the dual thing. I think we gotta adopt the policies. Because right now, we don't have a policy against that.
Okay, so I would
That
say that we cannot have non-voting members. Period.
That's what I say. We don't,
Well, there has to, like you said, Joe, I think there has to be just consistent. We need to adopt a policy that simply says if you're going to have ex officio members, and if you've got, how many folk, did you say a few minutes ago, 11 folk?
11 folk on CPAC,
CPAC.
and then a couple of folks that have been participating on H-Tax for 20-plus years.
Well, it would seem to me that there be some policy as it relates to to ex officio members. Do you need to have ex officio members?
No, because they're not in statute. They're not in the ordinance. These are made-up things.
But
And they show favoritism and no transparency, and I have a problem with that.
my point is, and I understand that, my point is, do we need ex officio members?
No.
All right, if we don't need ex officio members, then we don't create a policy that would cater to ex officio members being on boards and agencies and commissions.
So the next bullet then, Pam, would be administrative policy, or there are no non-voting members on our boards and commissions, period.
or what you basically say is, the only people that are participating as members of boards and commissions are appointed by the city council.
I mean, that's the bottom line.
Positively.
That's the bottom line.
That's what you do.
That's the
Yeah,
bottom
all
line.
participants must be appointed, and then I guess we need to notify those people who are in that space
Or
that
notify the
they're no
committee
longer.
You got, how many folk on
And
CPAC?
here's what you do, you send those folks a nice note that simply
What
says,
are they,
as we clean up our
They
policies and make
vote?
things better, we notice that we have, the new policies only, but we would encourage you to, if you would like to continue as an active member of a board, to apply.
Apply, and also, you can always, listen as the public, but like, you can't.
No, but well, I mean, I'll say the specifics. I mean, we have the head of the Columbia Music Festival is some ex officio member of H-Tax, and this is no commentary on whether they do a good job or a bad job. It's just, you can't take one entity that is a receiver of public funds and make that person an ex officio member of a board and not be accountable to the appointing authority.
Yep. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Same thing with CPAC.
all right.
Okay.
So I think then the next step, so now that we have these, are these things we have to then formally adopt? Or are they adopted because we have created them?
It has to be formally adopted, I think.
Well,
don't you think? Some of them, anyway.
I think that there are several that you all need to recommend to all of council as your recommendations. And I guess at that time, they could adopt the ones you all are recommending. Because the ones that you all,
So like the, basically like the policy-related ones, so the change board requirements to live in the city, administrative policy, we're gonna do, everybody has 2 years. And then the last 3 on the back, like, I would like to see that at our next work session or whenever we are all together and get it moving.
That's
Okay.
what I was gonna say.
Okay.
I think my recommendation would be what you're saying. It's not bringing this straight up at council, so we have what we saw last night where it comes as a surprise on these grants and you have this is a work session discussion that we bring our recommendations to council at a work session.
And then we
We
adopt
talk
them.
through them and then we go vote at
That's
the next
correct.
council meeting.
Do we have to vote on administrative policies? That's my question. Like, I know that some of these with name change, that's an ordinance change. But could we just all say we consent to these policy
Yes,
changes?
it's
That's all
not,
we would
I
have to
don't, it's not a vote, you just need
Yeah.
to,
do. So by
you
the
know,
end
have
of
some-
that
It
work
has to be
session
consensual,
discussion, we would just
yes.
need. consent.
unless, the tree ordinance one, that's an ordinance, tree and
That would
appearance.
be the only one, I think.
That would be one we have to, because there's an actual ordinance that we'd have to change.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we could do that at a work
Okay.
session and just.
You know, at the very
have a report and
beginning
update.
of our conversation, I said that there would probably be some subjects that we'd have to do, that we need to have a work session to talk through and to, of course,
Well, I
have
think we
other
made some great
colleagues.
decisions, yeah.
Yes.
This is a- Brother McDowell, I think what you've done today that works really well is now we will bring these as recommendations to the work session versus starting from scratch. at
That's
the work
correct.
session.
That's correct.
And so basically what,
That's correct.
if we recommended this, then the will of the council is either gonna be to agree with our recommendation or disregard our
That's right.
recommendation.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
So we'll,
But we're three of, we're one shy of a majority of our recommendation.
Yeah, so I have a, okay, so we're good on next steps. So I have a question about the number of people on a committee, right? So like food policy has like 25 people. And then you have others that have like 8 people. And so I'd like to have us consider making a recommendation in terms of like 25 people to me is not a committee, it's a small conference. Like you're not at that point getting the viewpoints that you need. And so I would suggest that we limit some of these committees, unless there's some state statute or something, to maybe 10 to 15 people. 25 is a lot.
that's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, and I think that's a conversation, of course, I think we could perhaps have during a work session.
Can I just make, I totally agree with what both people were saying. As part of the work session discussion, would y'all identify the committees that have more than,
More than 10, 15?
I was gonna say more than 14, and there's a reason why I picked 14, because that 14 would be, technically, if you wanted to say everybody got 2 appointments, but we don't wanna do that, but, or pick the number, you wanna say 11?
Well, I think.
I don't have a problem with 7, if we can govern with 7 on council, we can govern with 7
I
on
mean,
committee.
I think more than
The
10
only
is.
thing that is an issue is if you do have a situation where you have people who are absent and then you have it too small, then they're not able to, have a
Then
quorum.
That's why we got the
But
attendance.
that's why
clause.
we-
I
You
agree,
people are.
but I mean,
I'm gonna say that,
I think that's why
I
the
would say,
number,
let's just
like
do
11,
11
an
is a
odd
good
number is
I
always a
think-
good
I
number.
think you should identify.
Yeah, if you could bring that,
All
and then
committees
our
north of
formal
11
recommendation to
11.
council would then be that we would like to revisit the maximum number of people allowed on boards and commissions.
And I'd say our recommendation would be 11.
11, yeah.
Okay, so get you a list of all committees with 11 or more member.
More than 11.
More than 11.
Okay, more than 11. And then your recommendation is that you limit those to 11 members. Okay.
Unless.
It's
what Dr. Boswell said,
required,
state
there's
like-
some state statute or
Like
requirement.
H-Tax, for example, has requirements of 2 hoteliers, 2 restaurateurs.
Right.
But I don't think
Right.
they're an absurd number of people either. They're like something like maybe 11 to 15 people. It's not 30 people, right?
Right, it's not as big as the food policy
ATAX is
committee.
small as well, so.
More than 11, okay,
Okay,
all right.
ma'am,
Yes, sir. Good work.
Got everything
think
done,
that-
good job.
I think that completes our task today.
Does.
Thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you very much. Any
Thank you
other,
all.
anything else that we need to talk about today as it relates to administrative policy?
No, I think,
Is this cameras on today?